St. Barbara's Cathedral, a jewel of late Gothic architecture and one of only 4 cathedral-type buildings in Bohemia, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The splendor of this building still testifies to the glory and wealth of the silver Kutna Hora and the deep piety of its creators. The temple is dedicated to the Virgin Barbara, an early Christian martyr who is invoked as a helper to those in need, intercessor for a good death and patroness of all those with a dangerous profession, especially miners. It was the miners who contributed most to the flourishing of the medieval town and the construction of the cathedral, which they dedicated to their patron saint. The origins of the building, which date back to the second half of the 14th century, are connected to the famous parlor stonemasonry workshop. In the middle of the 16th century, when the Kutna Hora mines ran out of silver, the construction had to be temporarily halted. The following centuries brought a wave of reconstructions and inventory replacements, especially in the Baroque style. The current appearance of the church dates from the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, when it was extensively restored. St. Barbara's Cathedral is a varied gallery of especially rare Gothic frescoes and stone art. Nevertheless, all generations have left their mark there. The Gothic two-story church of All Saints and Ossuary, built in the first half of the 14th century, stands on the grounds of a former Cistercian monastery amid a vast dark cemetery. In one of its towers, an eternal light burns as a symbol of hope for resurrection, guiding medieval pilgrims from all over Europe to the Sedlec Ossuary, where they would stop, pray, and quietly contemplate their lives. The skeletal remains, which are now stored in the lower chapel of the ossuary, come from exhumed graves from the large cemetery that was located on Sedlec Monastery land. The thousands of medieval inhabitants succumbed to famine, plague, and wars. According to legend, a monk spread soil from his Holy Land pilgrimage over the cemetery, consecrating it as a holy burial site. The reason for using skeletal decoration is memento mori. Remember, you must die. It is a Christian call to remember a person's last things. For more than 600 years, the roofs of Prague Castle have been overlooked by the towers of St. Vitus Cathedral. The cathedral, whose original name is St. Vitus, St. Wenceslas, and St. Adalbert Cathedral, is the biggest and the most important church in the Czech Republic. It's the seat of the Archbishop of Prague and the place where saints, kings, princes, and emperors of Bohemia are buried. The coronations of the kings of Bohemia were held there until 1836. It's one of the best examples of Gothic architecture. The first sanctuary on the place of present St. Vitus Cathedral was built by Wenceslas, the first Duke of Bohemia, in 926 to 930 as the third church built at Prague Castle. The founder Wenceslas was also buried there. However, the church, Rotunda, was destroyed by Prince Spitanev after 1060 and replaced by a new Romanesque basilica. But this basilica didn't stay long there. On the occasion of promotion of Prague's bishopric to archbishopric, King John of Luxembourg and later Charles IV started to build a large cathedral in Gothic style. Saint John of Nepomuk is one of the patron saints of the Czech Republic. Popular legend states that John was a confessor to the Queen of Bohemia and that he refused to reveal to the king what she told him in confession. In 1393, the king, enraged, had John tortured and thrown from the Charles Bridge in chains. A chapel dedicated to his memory is one of many that lines the cathedral. His tombstone, one of the most ornate sculptures in the cathedral, sits opposite the chapel. A statue on the Charles Bridge stands at the spot from which his body was cast into the river. Guests interested in climbing the more than 280 steps to the viewing platform, 328 feet above the castle courtyard, will be rewarded with panoramic views of the castle complex and city of Prague. Inside Prague Castle, you'll find one of the oldest buildings in Prague, St. George's Basilica. The 17th century red Baroque facade hides behind it, and some of Prague's best examples of Romanesque architecture still stand. St. George's Basilica was founded by Vladislav I of Bohemia in 920, who dedicated the church to St. George. In 973, an addition was built to house St. George's Benedictine Abbey. Like many buildings of the time, it was partially destroyed by a fire in 1142, but rebuilt with all the original materials that could be saved from the wreckage. The church's overall design is very simple. Inside, it has one very wide central apse and two side aisles. In addition to the red Baroque facade, the basilica is also home to two magnificent white towers, which were added in the 12th century. The narrower north tower is named Eve, and the larger tower to the south is named Adam. Inside the small church, towards the front, is a Gothic-style chapel which holds the tomb of Saint Ludmila of Bohemia. The monastery complex in Cesky Krumlov is one of the most important and interesting medieval complexes in Central Europe. This unique set of buildings was founded in 1350 as a joint monastery of Minorites and Poor Clares, to which lay nuns were soon added. The Order of the Knights of the Cross with the Red Star, whose banner can be seen in the antechamber, was founded by Saint Agnes of Bohemia in 1233 as a hospital fraternity dedicated to the care of the elderly, the poor, the sick, travelers on the road, and other need people. Currently, the Religious and Service Order owns most of the monastery complex and centers its work near the medieval monastery in Prague. The spiritual center of the monastery complex is the medieval Church of Corpus Christi and the Virgin Mary, which was significantly rebuilt in the Baroque style during the 17th century. The church served religious orders, the townspeople of Krumlov, and the Bohemian noble families who lived nearby.